Yep, fair enough. On the 3rd of February at 1 a.m., I emailed everybody asking them to join the Legacy project. Tony was interested, but didn't have much space. This dude's got too many tattoos and not much time at all. He gave me a list of the pieces that got his attention, and I jumped on the Bowsette Boosette idea. It's my project, I'm going to do what I want. I decided that this time I'm going to try making a stencil using Procreate instead of my usual Photoshop method. So I start by removing my border and removing all background so that I've got a transparent layer. I export it as a PNG to keep the transparency, copy it to my clipboard, open a new project and paste it in there. Now, I think in this one I actually did some larking about where I removed the background and then later I put the background back in, but I think it made sense. I don't remember why. Anyway, we start by opening the hue, saturation and brightness, removing the saturation. Yep, cool. So it's black and white. Duplicate the layer and turn the top layer into a divide layer. Now, we want to open our settings. You see, I added that background back in. Smart. Anyway, we use a Gaussian blur on the divide layer to bring some of the details out and turn it into a useful stencil. I then group those together, merge them and turn those into a linear burn so that it accents some of the darker tones. Further to that, I go into my curves and I bump up some of my darks, make them even darker until it's a stencil that I feel is going to be nice and readable for me. A huge conversation recently is how I can read my stencils. Actually, I prefer a stencil that's harder to read so that I'm forced to look at my reference more. The more I look at my reference and the more I try and visualize what's going on, the more I find it's a better finished piece and actually the more fun that I have. Now, my least favorite part of any tattoo is the stenciling. You can see that I make the same mistake that I always make by not having tape ready. I have to go back and put it on my hand. And I do learn as I go through this particular one. But what I don't take into consideration is things like I reprinted that middle stencil. So I have to go then and print the final stencil again because now it's out of line. I also find that there's a streak running through where the paper is folded and I feel inordinate rage. But I ultimately decided it doesn't actually matter because I'm not tattooing that section today, so I'm not going to do more work than I need to by printing that stencil off again. Now, the stencil's so huge that it's hanging off the edge of the table and I use a pair of scissors to pin it in place. Something's gone on my table today and I don't quite know why I'm so angry. Little things like that split wouldn't have bothered me normally. And then I lift that up and that happens. The good thing about it is it made me sit back and wonder why I'm having so much trouble today, and it's because the print station's a goddamn mess. So I get to make the whole stencil all over again. This was like 16 minutes of stencil making that I've compressed into this 15 seconds, and I'm just furious. And my client comes over and starts talking to me, and I'm trying to play it off like I'm not in a feral rage, but I am. Now, normally a bit of green soap is enough to shave an area for a tattoo, but due to my intimate relationship with this client, I just needed to rub his leg, rub that silky, silky foam all over. Anyway, I'm using Electrum. I'm going to do my same mix of the green gold and the gold standard, just mix them together so that it's a little bit more fluid for that stencil to stick better, especially with this inkjet. What is this stuff called? I'm never going to learn, am I? They need to change the name, really. They really should change the name because it's dumb. If I can't remember what it's called, it's a dumb product. Anyway, it takes me and Molly a combined effort of 2 tattoo artists to apply this stencil. Now, I'm not too worried about the top half holding because it's going to come off before our session in the next day anyway. I spray my hands with isopropyl and I run around the edge and I just use the isopropyl to smudge the stencil so I can see where I want that tattoo to end, avoiding some of the tattoos that he's already got. Now I'm going to run through very quickly the colors that I used. If you are actually interested in all the colors that I use for this piece and why I'm using them, then obviously here's my plug. Go over to my Patreon, pay the money and I will tell you all my secrets. I think that's a pretty good deal. Secrets in exchange for money. It's not really secret. I just want to get paid. Because, greedy pig man. Anyway, I dropped one of my needles before I've even managed to open the packet, so it's still waste. What a waste. What a wasteful waste. Anyway, as always, I start at the bottom of my tattoo and I work my way up. I always try and break it into 60 to 90 minute sections. That way I can go round and round a section and it hasn't been long enough that it starts to get too painful for the client. That's how come I can push people through these, 9-hour sessions, 3 days in a row, and people just are able to take it. Now, we're going to get rid of Sonic. He is not faster than my needles. See you later, boy. Day 1 finished with boobs. Now, I will just want to bring some attention to the Bowser on the side here, on her ribs. That is my favorite part of this whole tattoo, and I'm so proud of that. I think that's really funny. Anyway, on to day 2. We start, as always, with stenciling, and more stenciling. I'm quite disappointed with how my stencil comes out on the second day. It's just not looking how I'd hoped. It's printing really weirdly. And now I think that this is all because I bought the cheaper stencil printer. Nailed it. I go through and I check what I did the day before so I can make sure that I'm cutting the right amount of stencil, because I am extending beyond the borders of what I designed so that it fits the leg better. Now, we're doing a slightly shorter session today, so I'm not hoping to get loads and loads done. I'm just hoping to get like the shoulder and Bouzette's face finished. It was my client's birthday the day before, and he had plans to go and see the new Dune movie today. So, keeping it relatively short and just getting what I need so that day 3 is not too much of a slog. We start around the edge, dancing around Mickey Mouse there, and I get all the boring bits done first, getting the hair and all of the bits that I hate. I fucking hate doing hair. It is actually the worst part of my entire job. I was complaining just now about doing stencils, but this is actually worse. Now, there is a full video of me doing this in real time going up on my Patreon. So if you want to see that, you can go. That is a second plug for my Patreon. Yeah, that is. And I'm not embarrassed. Anyway, as always the case with faces, I build out the bits that make sense for me structurally. So you'll see that I put the eyes and mouth in, put the nose in, and then started building up like the smoother gradients before going into the details. I'm using 0.25 pins in my needles just to make sure that I don't do too much skin damage, so I can do things like put white in and then put colour in, and they don't stain each other. Now we come to the end of the first day. It's not masses that we've done today, but if I were to start the next bit, we would take about 2 hours, and Tony would miss Dune, and that's not fair. We see Brie wrapping him up and pushing the air bubbles out. Doesn't really matter today. I'm glad she did it. She needed a little bit of help. This is the most important thing. When you're working with other people, you have other people to help you pull your sleeves up, which is, you don't understand, so important. Day 3. As always, starts with more stenciling and stenciling and stenciling. I again check what I did yesterday so I can visualize where those lines need to end. Because this tattoo is so inordinately long, I've been printing everything off in landscape, not landscape, the exact opposite, portrait. And now we're onto the back of the thigh where the image needs to be wider than the paper can actually manage in portrait. So I've had to print it off in landscape. You can see I threw a little hissy fit and just like threw my paper everywhere. I will pick it up. It felt cathartic. It felt good. Now, while I'm just finishing off my stencil, Brie unwraps my client, gives him a clean, and helps me prep for the stencil. As you can see, it takes 2 of us to apply a stencil because it's so bloody big and has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that we both wanted to just hold his leg. Anyway, we peel the stencil off, and turns out I really hate it. So I get Brie to give it a clean while I print off a replacement, And this one goes on, I'm not going to say better, just less shitly. You can see me already frustrated laughing at it. We peel it off, and as we get near the bottom, I find that the whole collar section hasn't held at all. Good thing I can draw. So I draw in the collar, and we get started in the same way we always do, just going right up to what we've done before, get the paint over and done with, get it out of the way, and then we move on to these big sweeping sections of solid colour so we don't hang around in those painful areas too long. Now, are you ready for the third plug of this video? If you head over to my Patreon, I will post the video of me doing this face in real time. So again, you can see how I approach the whole thing. As always, I mark out the bits that help me build structure. In this case, I felt it was important to get the edges of the hair in quite early on, and then I could run through the main bulk of the face with these large mags and just smooth it all out. As always, the bits that I select are all about the structure and what will help me visualize and see what I'm actually piecing together. We very quickly move through the hair, get her crown in, get those horns in, and move on to the background. One thing I think is quite interesting is you saw a ballpoint pen line, which was to show me where I wanted the background to end. Now, this is a completely original design. My poor client had no part in the actual design of this. The only problem we had was trying to get rid of the cover-up section. This is one of my favorite pieces. I'm so happy with how it came out. I'm so pleased with like the Bowser at the bottom and trying my new approach with the neons. I did something slightly different with how I approached the neon because I didn't want them to be like clean tubes of just neon lights. It was something a little bit more exciting and interesting. Now, I actually have run out of footage, but I still have more to say. So if you head over to my Patreon, that's 4 plugs in one video. Congratulations, Sammy, you greedy pigman. You will see me talk about this forever and ever. Also, prints of this piece are going to be available on my website. Go and spend money. And thanks for watching. Don't subscribe. This is garbage.